The house is dark. Not the soft darkness of a place where people sleep, but the dense, unused dark of rooms that have learned to stay empty. A utility worker stands just inside the front door, boots planted on a floor that hasn't felt weight in years. His flashlight moves slowly, cautiously, as if the beam itself might disturb something. Dust lifts and settles again. The air smells stale, old, sealed. He is here for a simple reason, a routine check, a line on a clipboard that won't clear. The meter outside keeps reporting usage. Not much, just enough. The house has no active occupants, no registered residents, no recent service requests. According to the records, it should be dead, electrically silent, a closed system. But the meter has been counting. Click. Pause. Click. He heard it before he even unlocked the door, standing in the yard, paperwork folded under his arm, listening to that faint, patient sound coming from the side of the building. The slow, mechanical advance of numbers that believes something is still happening here. Inside, the flashlight trembles slightly in his hand. Not from fear, he would later admit to, just fatigue, he tells himself. It's late. Houses like this always feel strange at night. Still, he doesn't move right away. He listens. Somewhere beyond the walls, behind the sealed rooms and forgotten circuits, electricity is being consumed, drawn, converted into something. Heat, motion, light, even if no light is visible. The meter does not lie, it only reports. The living room opens first. Furniture remains, but only barely. A couch collapsed inward like it gave up. A table with one leg propped on a book that is swollen from moisture. The flashlight glides over picture frames turned face down, as if the house itself decided not to look anymore. No lamps are plugged in. No television. No visible appliances. The outlets are empty mouths. The worker steps further inside. The door closes behind him with a soft, final sound. He pauses again, listening. Click. Pause. Click. It isn't loud. It doesn't echo. It isn't dramatic. If he weren't listening for it, he might miss it entirely. That somehow makes it worse. He checks the breaker box first. Habit. Training. The panel is old, metal dulled by time, but intact. He opens it carefully. The flashlight reveals rows of switches, most of them flipped down. Off, off, off. One breaker remains up. Just one. He stares at it longer than he should. The label beside it has faded to nothing. Whatever handwriting once explained it is gone now, erased by years of neglect and heat. He considers flipping it. He doesn't. Not yet. Instead, he walks the hallway. His boots make dull sounds against the floor, the noise absorbed quickly by the house. Doors line the corridor, all closed. He tries the first one. A bedroom, bare except for a mattress collapsed directly onto the floor. No sheets, no pillow. The window is shut, but the glass is cloudy, like it has forgotten what it's supposed to show. No electronics, no lamps, nothing drawing power. The second door opens into a bathroom. The mirror is still there, but heavily spotted. The sink faucet drips once, then stops. He waits for it to drip again. It doesn't. The silence presses closer. Click, pause, click. The sound isn't coming from any one room. It feels spread out, diffuse, as if the house itself is breathing in very small, very controlled increments. He checks the kitchen next. Cabinets hang open, hinges rusted in place. The refrigerator is unplugged, door ajar, interior empty and dry. No hum, no residual warmth. Still, the meter turns. He thinks of calling it in, reporting a faulty reading. Old houses develop quirks, lines cross, meters drift. Numbers can lie if you don't watch them closely. But he has watched this one for months. The usage never spikes, never drops to zero. It remains steady, stubborn, patient, like something that understands restraint. He reaches the end of the hallway. One door remains. It is heavier than the others, not locked, just resistant, as if the air on the other side has decided to stay put. When it opens, the sound changes. Not louder, closer. The room is small, a kind of storage space, maybe once an office. The window is boarded from the inside, thick planks nailed carefully, deliberately, as though someone took their time. There's nothing in the room except a single object near the far wall, a device. Not modern, not antique enough to be decorative, something utilitarian, boxy, connected to the wall by a cable that disappears into an outlet. The outlet is live. A small indicator light glows on the device's face, steady, calm, unconcerned. The utility worker doesn't recognize the machine. There are no labels, no manufacturer's name, just vents, a faint vibration he can feel through the floor when he steps closer. He listens. The clicking sound is clearer now, not the meter itself, but something in conversation with it, a response, a confirmation. Energy in, energy used. For what, he cannot tell. He does not touch the device. He circles it slowly, flashlight tracing its edges. No moving parts, no obvious output, no sound beyond the soft internal activity that suggests it is doing exactly what it was designed to do, whatever that is. He looks back at the cable, old but not decaying, recently replaced maybe. Someone maintained this connection long after the rest of the house was allowed to rot. A thought occurs to him then, unwelcome, persistent. If this machine is here, who turned it on? The house shows no signs of recent entry, no footprints, no fresh dust disturbances beyond his own, no fingerprints on the door he opened. The device has no timer, no visible controls, no off switch, just function. Click, pause, click. He steps back, suddenly aware of how alone he is, how completely the world outside this house is receded. The streetlights, the passing cars, the ordinary noise of life, all of it feels very far away. He considers the breaker again, the single switch still standing. He knows that flipping it would end this. The meter would stop, the report would close, the house would finally become what the records say it already is, empty. But his hand doesn't move. Instead, he writes a note on the clipboard, short, careful, non-committal. Unidentified draw source, investigation incomplete. He does not unplug the device. He does not flip the breaker. He backs out of the room, closes the door gently as if noise might matter. When he leaves the house, the night air feels colder than it should. He stands by the meter one last time, watches the numbers advance. Click, pause, click. Whatever is happening inside that house does not react to his presence. It does not speed up. It does not slow down. It continues. The file opens here, not with an answer, but with a sound that refuses to stop.
The address appears ordinary, a single line in a municipal database, a street name that repeats elsewhere in the city, a house number that does not stand out. No warning symbols, no hazard codes, just a status field quietly contradictory. Vacant, active consumption. At first, no one notices. Utility systems are built to tolerate small inconsistencies, a few kilowatts here, a rounding error there. Old meters drift, paperwork lags behind reality. Cities run on approximation more than precision. This address survives by being unremarkable. The first report is automatic, generated by software, no human voice attached. Continuous baseline draw detected at unoccupied residence. It is routed to a general inbox. It waits. It ages. Weeks later, a technician adds a note by hand. Meter verified. No signs of tampering. Occupancy still listed as 0. The handwriting is tight, professional, no emphasis, no underline, just a statement of fact. Another month passes. The system flags the address again. Same draw, same steady pattern, no spikes, no outages, no seasonal variation. Winter does not increase it, summer does not reduce it. Whatever is using power inside that house does not care about temperature. An inspector is assigned. The inspection log exists briefly, then it disappears. Not erased, not shredded, just absent. A gap where a document number should be. Other files before and after remain intact. No one writes an explanation for the absence. A different hand appears in the margins of the file soon after. Unable to confirm source, recommend follow-up. Below it, in darker ink, follow-up deferred. No reason given. The file thickens slowly, not with revelations, but with quiet accumulation. Printed graphs, meter readouts, timestamps marching forward in neat columns. Years begin to stack. The address changes ownership on paper once. A bank takes possession, then releases it. The property taxes go unpaid, then are quietly forgiven under a city revitalization program that never reaches this street. The house remains listed as vacant. The power remains on. One memo stands out, not because of what it says, but because of who wrote it. An internal compliance officer, not field staff, not engineering. Someone whose job is to notice patterns that do not resolve themselves. The memo is brief. This address has generated 12 unresolved consumption alerts over 36 months. No remediation recorded. Recommend escalation or classification review. Below it is a stamp. Received. Nothing else. No response memo, no escalation record. The recommendation vanishes into the file like breath into cold air. Later, someone underlines the address in red. No explanation accompanies the mark. Another note appears, unsigned. Technicians reporting discomfort. No quotation marks, no elaboration, just the sentence stranded on the page. The file does not describe incidents. There are no claims of threats, no allegations of danger, no injuries, no equipment failures, just discomfort. A word administrators dislike because it cannot be measured. Soon after, the tone changes. The language becomes procedural, defensive, less curious. Meter functioning within acceptable tolerances. No evidence of theft or external siphoning. Structure not condemned. Access limited. Access how, the file does not say. A supervisor adds a handwritten margin note. This keeps coming back. Why? The question is never answered. Instead, a new document is added. Heavier paper, official letterhead. Internal use only. It lists the address, the account number, and a summary conclusion. Source of consumption unidentified. No actionable violation detected. Continued monitoring yields no operational benefit. At the bottom, a recommendation is typed, carefully worded. Consider discontinuing on-site inspections unless conditions change. This is the first time the file suggests doing less rather than more. A quiet pivot from investigation to avoidance. One last technician visit is recorded after that memo. The notes are sparse, written quickly, as if the author did not intend them to be read closely.
Entered structure. Power active. No occupants. No appliances of note. Then, almost as an afterthought, audible meter activity persists. The word audible is circled. No one comments on the circle. Months later, a redaction appears. Entire paragraphs blacked out in a copied report, not classified, not sensitive, just removed. The visible text above the redaction reads, given prior outcomes. The visible text below reads, "We advise no further dispatch." Between them, the record goes dark. From that point on, the file stops growing in the usual way. No more field reports, no more inspections, no photographs, no signatures. Only automated data continues to flow in. Monthly usage summaries, quarterly reviews, annual audits. Each one notes the same thing. Consumption continues. Someone, somewhere, changes the status code, not to resolved, not to inactive, but to something else. Do not assign. It is not a standard designation. There is no policy document explaining it, yet it is respected. New technicians are not sent. The address is quietly excluded from routing software. When alerts trigger, they are auto-closed with a generic reason code. Reviewed, no action required. No human initials follow. The file is technically open. It is not destroyed. It is not archived off-site. It simply stops being discussed. Years pass. Staff turnover erases institutional memory. The people who first notice the anomaly retire, transfer, or die. Their concerns are not inherited. Only their paperwork remains. Occasionally, a junior analyst stumbles onto the address during a routine audit. They flag it. They ask a question. Why is this still active? The answer comes back quickly, always the same. Known issue. Do not pursue. No one explains how it became known. No one can say who decided. At some point, the phrase, "Stop sending technicians," appears in a margin, not as an order, not as a directive, as a reminder. The unease here is not dramatic. It does not announce itself. It does not demand belief. It settles instead in the spaces between documents, in the decisions that choose silence over resolution. No one ever writes that the house is dangerous. No one claims it is haunted. No one attributes intention. The record is careful to avoid such things. What it does show is something else, a slow institutional withdrawal, a collective decision to let an unanswered question remain unanswered because answering it did not seem worth the cost, whatever that cost might be. By the time File 008 is sealed, the house has been drawing power for longer than some employees have been alive. The seal itself is unceremonious, a digital tag, a checkbox ticked. Inactive file, monitoring only. No closing statement, no conclusion, just an understanding passed quietly from system to system that this address is not to be touched. Not because anyone knows what is wrong, but because everyone knows something is. And that knowledge, undocumented and unspoken, is enough. The file closes without resolution. The meter continues to turn. Before it became a line item, before it became a problem, before anyone learned to stop asking questions, the house was ordinary. It stood on a street built in the long middle years of the city, when expansion still felt hopeful and measured. The road was narrow but well kept. Trees were planted at even intervals, their roots lifting the sidewalks just enough to trip inattentive children. Working families lived here, not wealthy, not desperate. People whose lives moved on schedules shaped by factory whistles, bus routes, and school bells. In the early mornings, lights came on one by one. Kitchens first, then bedrooms, then the soft glow of bathroom bulbs behind frosted glass. Electricity meant the day had begun. Radios murmured weather reports and local news. A voice reading headlines no one fully listened to. Music crackling through cheap speakers while shirts were buttoned and lunches wrapped in paper. Kettles clicked on, toasters warmed, coffee pots hummed quietly on countertops. The house participated in all of it. Its porch light shut off shortly after sunrise. Its interior lights followed a pattern that matched the family inside. One bedroom later than the others, one lamp that stayed on longer in the evening because someone liked to read. At night, the windows glowed amber, not bright, just enough to say someone was home. The meter outside turned faster then. Not wildly, naturally. Electricity in those years was a visible language, a way of knowing who was awake, who would return, who was still expected. Children walked home before the streetlights came on. That mattered. It was an unspoken rule. The moment those lights flickered to life, parents began to check watches, then doorways. From the house, someone would look out and count familiar shapes moving down the block. A backpack slung low, a bike pushed instead of ridden, a pair of siblings arguing quietly about nothing important. Inside, the radio volume dropped. A pot was stirred more slowly. Attention shifted outward. This was how electricity marked care. On winter evenings, the house held warmth. The heater clicked on and off through the night, fighting the cold just well enough. The family learned the sounds, the brief whine, the soft thump, and slept through them. In summer, fans moved heavy air from room to room. Windows stayed open longer as daylight lingered. The house adapted, as all lived-in places do. There were holidays. The power draw spiked briefly then. Extra lights, cooking that lasted all day, a television left on for background noise even when no one was watching. There were arguments too, loud enough sometimes that neighbors noticed, but not enough to call anyone. Doors closed harder than necessary, radios turned up to avoid hearing what wasn't meant to be shared. Later, apologies were made in kitchens lit by a single bulb, the kind that casts shadows upward, making faces look tired rather than angry. Electricity stayed constant through it all. When someone was sick, a light stayed on through the night. When someone couldn't sleep, the television glowed quietly at low volume. When someone didn't come home on time, the porch light stayed on longer than usual. The house learned these rhythms. The records show nothing unusual during these years. Bills were paid, inspections passed, no complaints, no citations, just usage. Steady, human, understandable. At some point, in the file cannot agree on exactly when, the household grew smaller. One less bedroom lit at night, one less place set at the table, a radio that no longer turned on in the morning. The meter reflected this, not abruptly, gradually. Consumption dropped, then stabilized again at a new, lower normal. Grief, like electricity, leaves patterns. The neighborhood noticed changes before the city ever did. A car that stopped appearing in the driveway, curtains that stayed drawn longer during the day, a porch that went unswept through a full season. Still, the house remained occupied. Lights came on, water ran, power flowed where it was expected to. Neighbors remember the house as quiet but not empty, the kind of place where someone waved from a window rather than coming outside, where packages were brought in promptly, but conversations were brief. No one remembers anything strange. That is important. Nothing marked the house as different. Then routines thinned further.
A week would pass, with no lights visible from the street. Then suddenly they would return, all at once, as if someone had arrived late and turned everything on at the same time. The meter recorded these fluctuations, still within reason, still explainable. Until one day, the lights did not come back. Not visibly. The porch light stayed off. The windows remained dark. No radio sounds leaked into the street. The neighborhood adjusted its expectations quietly. People assumed what people always assume. Someone moved, someone passed away, someone went somewhere else. The city was full of such disappearances. Most were unremarkable. But the meter did not follow the story everyone told themselves. Instead of dropping to zero, it settled into something new, lower than before, higher than nothing. A thin, continuous line of usage that never wavered. Inside the house, no one boiled water, no one turned pages by lamplight, no one left a television on for company. Yet power continued to move through the walls, electricity without witness. The symbolic weight of that would come later.
At the time, it meant nothing. The city did not watch individual meters closely enough to notice the absence of human patterns, only the presence of continuity. Years passed. The neighborhood changed. Children grew up and left. New families moved in. Some houses were renovated, others were left to age. The house remained still. Paint peeled, the yard grew uneven, leaves gathered and stayed. But inside, something remained awake. Not loudly, not brightly, just enough to register. In hindsight, this is where the silence begins to matter. Not because of what replaced life in the house, the file does not claim to know that, but because of what did not. No final surge of usage, no abrupt cutoff, no clear moment of departure. Life did not end here with a decisive gesture. It simply receded, leaving behind a structure that still received electricity long after it stopped showing signs of being lived in. In most cases, abandonment is loud in the data. Power drops, water use stops, patterns collapse. This house did not collapse. It thinned. And that thinning, slow, patient, unacknowledged, is what makes the later silence so heavy. Because when the lights finally stopped turning on, the house had already learned how to exist without being seen. Electricity, once a signal of warmth and presence, became something else entirely. Not proof of life, just proof of continuation. And that is the last normal thing the file can say about this place. Everything after belongs to the quiet.
The first sign is small. So small it does not feel like a sign at all. A meter reading arrives at the billing office on an ordinary morning, buried among hundreds of others. Numbers scroll across a screen. Most of them match expectations closely enough to avoid attention. This one is slightly higher. Not dramatically, not suspiciously, just off. The clerk notices it because she has been doing this long enough to notice patterns without thinking. Vacant properties usually drop to 0 within weeks. Sometimes they hover just above it, a security system, a forgotten fridge, a landlord who hasn't shut everything down properly. This one does not hover. It holds steady. She hesitates. The cursor blinks. She checks the occupancy field. Vacant. She checks the previous month. Similar number. She leans back in her chair and exhales. It is early. The office lights hum softly. Phones are already ringing. Someone down the row is laughing at something unrelated. She tells herself what people often tell themselves. Someone must still be there, or someone forgot to update the status, or the meter hasn't been reset properly. She approves the bill. No note is added. The system moves on. The following month, the number appears again, almost identical, a narrow band of usage that refuses to widen or shrink. A different clerk processes it this time. He does not notice the deviation. To him, it is just another entry in a long day of entries. This is how anomalies survive. They do not announce themselves. They repeat quietly. A technician driving past the house months later slows briefly. He has the address in his route notes, flagged for a routine visual check. From the street, the house looks tired but intact. No lights on, no movement, no obvious damage. He assumes what the paperwork implies. Vacant does not always mean empty. He notes, no visible issues, and continues on. Inside the system, that sentence carries weight. It resolves nothing, but reassures everything. Another small crack passes unnoticed. The meter continues to turn. Its movement is subtle, measured, predictable. It does not spike during storms. It does not dip during heat waves. It does not follow human schedules. But no one is looking for that yet. People trust systems because systems usually work. They trust that if something were truly wrong, an alert would sound, a report would escalate, a supervisor would intervene. They trust that someone else is watching more closely. At the billing office, a junior analyst notices a pattern during a quarterly review. A graph flattens where it should have dropped. The address appears again, like a familiar face in the crowd. He zooms in. The line is thin, almost elegant. He frowns. Vacant properties usually show noise, irregularity. This one is too consistent. He starts to write a note, stops, deletes it. He has learned, quickly, what gets rewarded and what gets delayed. Questions slow things down. Investigations require justification. This does not feel urgent enough. He tells himself there is probably an explanation. There usually is. A technician eventually does go inside the house, though the record of that visit will later be incomplete. His job that day is to verify the meter, nothing more. He expects to find signs of habitation, a lamp left on in a back room, a freezer humming quietly, something that explains the numbers. He finds none. Still, he assumes the explanation exists. He does not document his discomfort. He documents what he can verify. Meter intact, reading accurate. He leaves. No one asks him how the house felt. No one asks because there is no field for that. In the months that follow, the house begins to slip further from human attention. Not because anyone made a decision to abandon it, because attention, like power, flows where it is directed. The city is busy. There are outages elsewhere, fires, floods, complaints, emergencies that demand immediate response. A house that consumes a modest, unchanging amount of electricity does not compete well with those. Its quiet becomes its camouflage. Another billing clerk notices that the account has not been paid in some time. She checks the status. Vacant properties are often in arrears. There is a process for that. She forwards it to collections. Collections glances at it, then forwards it to property management. Property management checks the address against a list. The house appears in a gray zone, not condemned, not occupied, not actively disputed. The electricity remains on because no one has requested it be turned off, and no one has requested it be turned off because the meter still shows use. A closed loop of assumption forms. Electricity implies presence. Presence implies responsibility. Responsibility implies someone will notice. No one does. A supervisor eventually scribbles a question mark next to the account number during a review meeting. It is a reflex more than a concern. "What's this one?" she asks. Someone else answers without looking up. "Oh, that house. It's always like that." The explanation satisfies no one, but it also challenges no one. Meetings move on. This is how institutions forget things without ever meaning to. The house drifts not because it is ignored, but because it never quite demands attention. Technicians assume someone else has already checked thoroughly. Clerks assume the status field is correct. Supervisors assume that if there were a problem, it would have grown louder by now. The numbers remain small. That is their greatest defense. The house stays connected to the grid, humming quietly in a way that blends into the background noise of a functioning city. It does not ask for help. It does not fail catastrophically. It does not demand repair. It simply continues. Years later, when the file is finally pulled in full, these early moments will look obvious in hindsight. The slight elevation, the flat line, the repeated approvals without comment. People will ask how it went unnoticed for so long. The answer is uncomfortable in its simplicity. It did not go unnoticed. It went unchallenged. At each step, a human being made a reasonable choice, a defensible choice, a choice shaped by workload, habit, and trust in systems designed to catch what individuals cannot. No one falsified data, no one lied, no one deliberately looked away. They just assumed the system would correct itself,
assumed someone else had context they did not, assumed that vacancy was a temporary state, not a condition that could persist indefinitely. As the house slipped further into obscurity, the grid did not release it. Electricity kept flowing because nothing told it to stop. The city's infrastructure is built to serve continuity, to maintain connection until disconnection is explicitly requested. And no one ever made that request. The house became something neither fully active nor fully abandoned, a structure without witnesses, a meter without explanation, a file that grew thicker without growing clearer. The first cracks were never dramatic enough to inspire fear. They inspired something more dangerous: confidence. Confidence that everything was functioning as intended. Confidence that silence meant stability. By the time anyone realized the numbers truly did not add up, the house had already been drifting for years, out of sight, out of conversation, but never out of the grid. Still drawing power, still counted, still present in the only way that mattered to the system watching it. The first cracks did not break anything open. They simply widened slowly enough that no one noticed the gap forming. And by the time it was visible, the house was already very far from human attention. Connected, but no longer held.
The decision is made quietly. No announcement, no urgency. A note appears in the system after yet another automated alert closes itself. Verify vacancy. Final confirmation. It is framed as cleanup, housekeeping, a loose end someone decides at last to tie off. 2 officials are assigned, one from utilities, one from property services. Neither specializes in anomalies, neither is briefed beyond the basics. Vacant address, active consumption, no prior resolution. They arrive just after mid-morning. The street is brighter than anyone expects. Sunlight reflects off parked cars. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower starts and stops again. Life continues at a normal volume. The house does not stand out. Paint peeled, yes. Yard uneven, yes. But nothing about it demands attention. They park at the curb, sit for a moment longer than necessary, review the clipboard, confirm the address twice, even though it matches the number nailed beside the door. 10:17 a.m. The key is old, heavy. It resists at first, then turns with a sound that feels louder than it should. When the door opens, the air does not move. It smells like dust that is settled and resettled many times, like paper left too long in a closed box. Not decay, not rot, just abandonment. They pause on the threshold, let their eyes adjust. The entryway is dim but intact. No signs of forced entry, no damage, no recent footprints in the dust. The door closes behind them. The sound is final. 10:19 a.m. They stand still, listening. No voices, no movement, no hum of appliances. And yet, faintly, undeniably, there is the sound they were warned about. The meter. Click, pause, click. It is not coming from the walls exactly, more like from everywhere at once, a presence without a direction. They exchange a look, not alarmed, just acknowledging. 10:22 a.m. They begin in the living room. Furniture remains where it was left, a couch angled slightly away from the window, a chair positioned as if someone once watched television from it. There is no television. Outlets are empty. Extension cords lie coiled and unused. Lamps sit unplugged beside them, their shades yellowed with age. One official kneels, checks behind the couch. Nothing. 10:27 a.m. They move methodically. Kitchen next. Cabinets open easily, empty, clean in a way that suggests someone cleared them deliberately. The refrigerator stands unplugged, door ajar, interior dry. The outlet behind it is live. The utilities official tests it. The indicator lights confirm power. The refrigerator is not drawing it. 10:31 a.m. They check the breaker box. Most switches are down. One remains up. It is unlabeled. The utilities official touches it, hesitates, then leaves it alone. They are here to observe, not intervene. 10:35 a.m. Bedrooms. The first contains a bed frame without a mattress. Dust outlines where it once rested. The window is closed. The curtain rod remains bare. No electronics, no chargers, no lamps plugged in. The second bedroom is smaller, child-sized once. Faded decals peel from the walls, shapes that used to glow faintly in the dark. Stars, planets. They do not glow anymore. 10:42 a.m. Bathroom. Mirror spotted, faucet dry. No hum behind the walls, no running toilet, no sign of recent use. Everything agrees with vacancy. Everything except the meter. Click, pause, click. 10:47 a.m. They reach the back of the house, a door that sticks slightly when opened. A room with no obvious purpose, no furniture, just empty floor and a boarded window. This is where they stop, not because they see something frightening, because they see something that refuses to explain itself. Against the wall sits a device. It is not large, not imposing, something that could be overlooked if you weren't already looking closely. A box, vented, connected directly to a wall outlet. A single indicator light glows steadily. Green. Alive. 10:49 a.m. They do not touch it at first. They walk around it, photograph it, check the outlet, trace the cable as far as it goes, directly into the wall. No illegal wiring, no external connections, no visible output. The device makes a faint sound, not a whine, not a buzz, a quiet internal activity, as if it is processing something continuously, patiently. 10:53 a.m. The property official asks a question that does not make it into the report. Do you know what that is? The utilities official shakes his head. They search for labels, manufacturer marks, serial numbers. There are none. 10:57 a.m. They step back into the hallway. The sound of the meter seems louder now, though it has not changed. Click. Pause. Click. It marks time without caring what time means here. 11:02 a.m. They check every outlet in the house. All are live. None are drawing power except the one feeding the device. They unplug it. Nothing dramatic happens. No sparks, no alarms, no sudden silence. But the indicator light fades slowly, like something going to sleep rather than shutting down. The meter outside stops. For the first time in years, the numbers hold still. 11:04 a.m. They stand there, watching. Neither says anything. They wait. A minute passes, then 2. The meter remains still. They note the time carefully. 11:09 a.m. The utilities official plugs the device back in, not out of curiosity, out of procedure. The indicator light returns immediately. The meter resumes its movement. Click. Pause. Click. 11:12 a.m. They exchange another look, this one heavier. Everything they have observed points to a conclusion they are not trained to articulate. The house is empty. It has been empty for a long time, and yet something inside it requires power. Not illegally, not accidentally, intentionally. 11:18 a.m. They finish their documentation. photographs, notes, measurements. The language remains cautious. Structure unoccupied. No evidence of unauthorized habitation. No appliances drawing power. Source of consumption identified but function unknown. No speculation. No adjectives. 11:26 a.m. They lock the door behind them. The street looks the same as it did when they arrived. A car passes. A dog barks somewhere nearby. Normal life resumes its volume. The meter continues to turn. They do not remove the device. They are not instructed to. The house has now been officially confirmed empty. That confirmation changes nothing. The file gains a timestamp, a final verification, a phrase that should bring closure. Vacancy confirmed. But the electricity keeps flowing, and that, more than anything else, settles into the space between them as they leave. Not fear, not belief, just the quiet dread of something that has been observed clearly and still does not make sense. The kind of discomfort that does not spike adrenaline. It lingers, because the house did not resist inspection. It did not hide. It allowed itself to be known, completely, thoroughly, and still refused to resolve. The system now has proof of emptiness and proof of use, both true, both documented. The grid accepts this contradiction, without complaint. The officials drive away. Behind them, the house remains, connected, drawing power, doing whatever it has been doing all along, unseen, unquestioned, still turning the meter, one patient click at a time.
There is no single error to point to. No moment where a hand reached out and made the wrong decision in full view of consequences. The failure here is quieter. It unfolds in omissions, a file that moves without being held, a visit delayed without being rescheduled, a question noted without being owned. The system did not break. It functioned exactly as designed. That is the most uncomfortable part. Responsibility was present everywhere in small amounts and nowhere in full. The first handoff seems harmless. Billing notices an irregularity and forwards it to compliance. Compliance reviews it and forwards it to operations. Operations sends it back to the field for verification. At each stage, the file is intact, the data is preserved, the language is careful, but the meaning thims. By the time it returns to billing, it is no longer a concern. It is a known issue, something that has been looked at. No one can say by whom. In meetings, the address is referenced vaguely. That vacant house, that one that always does that. The phrasing matters. It transforms the anomaly into a personality, a quirk, a thing that belongs to the background. Once something is named that way, it stops demanding resolution. The city's systems are built around clear states, occupied or vacant, on or off, active or closed. This house does not fit cleanly into any of them, so it slides between. When a technician files a report that ends with no visible issues, it closes a loop that was never truly opened. The system reads that phrase as reassurance. The absence of a problem becomes proof that there is no problem. When another technician writes, "source unidentified," the phrase sounds temporary, like a placeholder waiting for future clarity. But placeholders, when left long enough, become permanent. There is no field in the database for unease, no checkbox for something that feels wrong but cannot be quantified. There is only consumption data, and consumption data continues. The people involved are not careless. They are tired. They manage dozens of addresses a day, hundreds a month, thousands a year. Most of them behave as expected. When one does not, the first instinct is not alarm. It is normalization. Surely there is a reason. Surely someone else knows it.
Surely this has been handled. This is how responsibility diffuses, not because people refuse it, because they assume it has already been accepted by someone upstream or downstream. The house becomes a shared burden so light that no one feels its weight. There is also the matter of cost. Investigations take time. Time requires justification. Justification requires a clear risk. What is the risk here? No theft, no hazard, no visible damage, just a meter turning when it should not. Electricity is abstract. You cannot see it being used unless it announces itself as light, heat, or motion. Here, it announces nothing. So the cost of stopping it feels higher than the cost of letting it continue. Someone suggests disconnecting service. Another points out that doing so would require a formal request, a notice period, a confirmation of vacancy, liability checks.
Paperwork multiplies. The momentum drains away. The file goes back on the shelf. On a human level, something else is happening too. The house is empty. Empty houses make people uneasy. They represent absence in a way that occupied spaces do not. People prefer to believe that someone, somewhere, is still connected to a place like this, that someone left a device running for a reason, that someone intends to return, that the story is not finished. It is easier than accepting that a structure can persist in use without purpose. Neglect does not feel like an action, it feels like neutrality. No one chose for the house to keep drawing power. No one chose to maintain the connection. They simply never chose to stop it. And in systems designed around choice, non-choice is often invisible. The final confirmation visit, the day the house is entered and found empty, should have been the moment of reckoning, proof at last. But even then, the response is muted. The device is documented, not removed. The consumption is identified, not explained. No one is assigned ownership of the next step. There is no who takes this from here. The file gains information, but not direction. This is how neglect survives evidence. It absorbs it. The house continues to draw power because disconnection requires intention, and intention requires someone to feel responsible. Responsibility never settles long enough to become action. The city's systems are optimized for continuity. They keep things running unless something forces them to stop. This is usually a strength. Here, it becomes the flaw. Electricity keeps flowing, not because it is needed, but because stopping it would require a decision that feels disproportionate to the harm being observed. So the harm remains unmeasured. The true cost is not the electricity itself. The kilowatts are negligible. The expense is barely noticeable in a municipal budget. The cost is the acceptance of unresolved absence. A house no one lives in, a device no one understands, a process no one completes. Each, on its own, is manageable. Together, they form a quiet failure of care. Not malicious, not negligent in the legal sense, just unattended. In the end, what went wrong is not that the house consumed power without explanation. It is that no one was ever tasked with asking what should happen to something that no longer had a person attached to it. No one was assigned to care. And without that assignment, the system did what it always does when faced with ambiguity. It maintained the connection. It allowed the meter to keep turning. It let the house exist in a state of unresolved use, not alive, not abandoned, but something in between. A place still counted by the grid long after it stopped being counted by people. That is the failure this file documents, not a mystery created by intent, but one sustained by absence. And absence, once embedded in a system, is very difficult to remove, because nothing pushes back, nothing escalates, nothing demands an ending. The house continues, not because someone chose for it to, but because no one chose otherwise.
Once the file stops growing,
The questions do not. They simply lose a place to go. In the absence of resolution, theories begin to form, not loudly, not recklessly. They appear in margins, in conversations held after meetings end, in the careful phrasing of internal emails that stop short of saying what they are circling. These theories are not attempts to dramatize the case. They are attempts to live with it. Each one offers a way to make the numbers behave. Each one allows the mind to rest, briefly, in explanation rather than uncertainty. None of them holds all the way. Administrative error theory. This is the first and most comfortable explanation. It assumes the problem exists only on paper. A mismatched meter, a misassigned address, a data stream attached to the wrong account. There is precedent for this. Cities run on layers of legacy systems, some of them decades old. Records are migrated, merged, reinterpreted. Mistakes happen quietly and persist until someone notices. In this theory, the house is innocent. The power is being used elsewhere, correctly, invisibly redirected by an administrative oversight. It explains the consistency. It explains the lack of visible appliances. It explains why nothing inside the house responds when inspected. People who favor this theory point to the missing logs, the redacted memos, the vague notes. These are signs of a paper trail that lost its way. But the theory strains under scrutiny. The meter was physically verified. The usage stopped when the device was unplugged. The numbers changed in direct response to actions taken inside the house. Administrative error cannot easily account for cause and effect. It also does not explain the device. An error does not glow green. An error does not hum quietly in an empty room. This theory comforts because it removes intention, but it leaves too much behind. Hidden infrastructure theory. This explanation is more technical, more serious. It suggests the house is not truly isolated, that beneath its floors or behind its walls lies a forgotten connection, a shared line, an old junction, a remnant from an earlier phase of the neighborhood's development. Cities are layered things. What exists now is built over what existed before. Lines are rerouted, systems are abandoned in place rather than removed. In this view, the house is a conduit. Electricity enters, passes through, and exits elsewhere. The device, then, could be a regulator, a transformer, a piece of infrastructure never properly documented, left to operate long after the people who installed it moved on. This theory appeals to engineers. It respects complexity. It acknowledges how often infrastructure outlives its documentation. There are examples of similar oversights: buildings that unknowingly powered streetlights, garages that fed adjacent properties, circuits that spanned parcels, no longer connected on paper. But again, the details resist. No outgoing lines were detected. No neighboring usage patterns correlate. No records suggest shared infrastructure at this location. And infrastructure, even forgotten infrastructure, tends to age visibly. This device does not. Its connection is deliberate, its operation stable, its presence contained. It behaves less like a remnant and more like a solution to a problem no one remembers defining. Human presence theory. This is the theory no one writes down. It lives in pauses, in the moment after someone says, "It doesn't make sense," and no one responds. It suggests that the house was not always as empty as it appeared.
That someone returned occasionally, briefly, quietly. Not a squatter, not a tenant, someone with a key. This theory explains why the device remained powered, why it was not removed, why it was not tampered with. It also aligns with the gradual nature of the house's withdrawal, the thinning of routines, the way life receded rather than stopped. Perhaps someone came back to the house not to live, but to maintain something, to keep it running. People who consider this theory point to the lack of disturbance, the absence of forced entry, the careful way the device was left connected. They imagine a person who did not want to be noticed, but imagination is not evidence. There are no footprints, no fingerprints, no recorded entries. The house shows no signs of recent human use, and the power draw never spikes the way it would if someone were present, even briefly. This theory unsettles because it introduces intention without proof. It asks the listener to accept that absence may not be complete, only disciplined. The file does not support this, but it does not entirely exclude it either. There are smaller theories: an undocumented security system, a legacy monitoring device, an experimental installation never properly decommissioned. Each explains part of the picture. None explains all of it. The most honest conclusion the file reaches is not a conclusion at all. It is an inventory of what remains unexplained. Why the usage never fluctuated, why the device had no markings, why no department claimed ownership, why no one ever returned for it. The theories fail not because they are irrational, but because the case refuses to be simplified. The house exists at the intersection of systems, electrical, bureaucratic, human, each of which assumes the others will resolve what it cannot. When they do not, something persists in the gap. What remains is not fear, it is unease, the discomfort of knowing that every explanation we have depends on conditions that are almost, but not quite met. Almost an error, almost infrastructure, almost human, almost, but never enough. The file does not ask the listener to choose a theory. It asks them to sit with the fact that multiple reasonable explanations can coexist and still fail to resolve the same quiet fact: that power was drawn, that no one was there, that no one stopped it. In the end, the unanswered questions are not about what the device was doing. They are about why its existence was allowed to become unremarkable, why a house could consume electricity for years without anyone needing to understand why explanation became optional. The theories circle these questions without landing, and perhaps that is the point. Not that the truth is unknowable, but that it became unnecessary. The file remains open in this way, not awaiting discovery, but demonstrating how easily unresolved things can be absorbed into the background of functioning systems, still powered, still accounted for, still unexplained. The meter continues to turn, and the theories, like the file itself, go no further than that.
The end does not arrive with clarity. It arrives with paperwork. A service order is generated on an ordinary weekday, bundled among dozens of others. The language is neutral, procedural, free of history. Disconnect service, vacant structure, account closure approved. No one references the file number aloud. No one revisits the notes. The order exists because enough time has passed and because the city is preparing for a broader infrastructure update along that street. The house is scheduled not because it is strange, but because it is old. A crew arrives in the late afternoon. They do not enter the house. They do not need to. They work outside, at the edge of the property, where the meter has been quietly doing its job for years. The technician kneels, opens the casing, notes the final reading. It is unremarkable. Lower than some, higher than none. Just another number to be recorded and forgotten. He disconnects the line. The meter stops. There is no sound to mark the moment, no shift in air, no feeling of release. Just the absence of motion where motion used to be. The casing is removed and placed in the truck. A newer, unused unit replaces it, sealed and dormant, waiting for a future that may never arrive. The house does not react.
Inside, the device goes dark for the last time. No one is there to see it. No one documents the moment when the quiet becomes complete. The service order is closed before the crew leaves the street, a checkbox ticked, a time logged, a task complete. The file is updated later that evening. Service disconnected. That is all. There is no follow-up investigation, no removal order for what remains inside the house. Once the electricity is gone, interest evaporates. Without power, the anomaly no longer exists. The device no longer draws attention because it no longer draws anything at all. The house slips fully into vacancy, the kind the system understands. Neighbors notice nothing. They had long ago stopped watching the windows. The house had blended into the background of the street, another structure that simply did not participate. A few people recall, vaguely, that something about it was once odd. Lights that never came on, bills that made no sense, a rumor passed quietly, and then forgotten. But memory requires reinforcement. Without it, even the strangest things flatten into normalcy. The city moves on. Budgets shift, departments reorganize. New staff take positions once held by people who remember the address only dimly, if at all. The file is boxed, not destroyed, not highlighted, returned to storage. Its label is accurate, but incomplete. File 008, closed. Inside, the documents remain in order. The notes, the reports, the unanswered questions. Nothing new is added. No conclusion is written.
The file is not declared solved because that word would suggest intent, effort, and resolution. This was none of those. It was cessation. Years later, the house still stands. Paint continues to peel, weather moves across it without resistance, leaves collect where they are not swept away. It remains unoccupied, unremarkable. No one stops to think about what it once sustained. And yet, something important lingers, not in the building, but in the record. For years, electricity flowed into a place without people, not stolen, not wasted recklessly, simply allowed. Something was being kept alive there, or kept running, or kept waiting. The file never claims to know which. What it shows instead is quieter and more unsettling, that a system designed to support human life can continue its work long after the humans are gone. That warmth, power, and continuity can persist without purpose. That care, when automated, does not stop on its own. It requires someone to notice absence and decide it matters. No one did. So the power stayed on, not because it was needed, but because stopping it felt unnecessary. In the end, the house did not fail. The grid did not fail. The people did not fail in any dramatic way. They simply moved on. And the house, for a long time, did not. The file rests now among thousands of others. It is rarely requested. When it is usually by someone new, someone who pauses longer than expected over the graphs, the notes, the consistency. They feel the same quiet discomfort. Then they close the folder. There is nothing left to do. The meter is gone. The house is silent. But the truth remains, gently unresolved. For years, something was sustained there, quietly, endlessly, without anyone knowing why. And when it finally stopped, nothing changed. That may be the most unsettling part. Not that the house once consumed power without explanation, but that its explanation became irrelevant before it ever arrived. The file is returned to storage, still warm from having been handled, not with electricity, but with memory. And then, like the house itself, it is left alone.